Hi there, it's Dr. Lawrence Maas here. As you remember from the intro on methylation, there are 5 roundabouts. We're going to be talking about number 2. Roundabout number 2 now, all to do with protein. All proteins carry methionine in it, and this is a big clockwise wheel. Remember those old bicycles that are really big with a big sort of like wheel and a tiny little pedal system? It's kind of like that. And so you've got this big wheel of protein, but with that big wheel of protein, you need another wheel to actually get it going. And of course, that little wheel is going to be the methylation and unmethylation of B12. What we've got now is if you don't have enough B12, you cannot process your protein. And here's the irony. You get your B12 from your proteins. It leads in one into the other. A lot of vegans and vegetarians, they suffer from a lack of protein, which sets them up for a lack of unmethylated B12. And this whole wheel starts to go really funky. If you want to be vegan vegetarian, you've got to make sure that you've got enough B12. Sorry about that. So you've got enough B12 in your diet. Because if you don't have enough B12 in your diet, you can't actually then process the protein, the methionine. And that's absolutely critical. If they are a meat eater and they've got good B12 coming through their diet, they may have a problem actually absorbing it, because the absorption genes and the carrying genes called FUT2 and TCN2, they can be faulty. Like in this example, double red with a double arrow down. It's absolutely imperative that that person doesn't start from unmethylated B12. That's unmethylated B12 is raw B12. It's like in the meats and stuff like that. It's much better to start with methylated B12. And that's what I do with all my clients. I actually pedal off not from here, raw B12, but actually methylated B12. It's a much better start point. And if the person is taking zinc, they'll be able to uncouple it with the zinc molecule. And to be honest with you, it doesn't really matter at this point what the FUTs and TCN2 genes are doing, because the moment you have zinc and the unmethylated B12 with a little bit of SAMe, it will remethylate into B12. And that's really important, the methylation and unmethylation of B12. And of course, that will drive the methionine. That meth bit came from this meth bit, which came from that meth bit. And that is really important because SAMe is built over here, right there. And that SAMe is absolutely critical. And some people have genes that don't actually help to make enough SAMe. Unfortunately, in this example, it's a perfectly green, clean MAT1A gene. But to be honest with you, if somebody was deficient in magnesium, potassium, and energy, they still would not be able to make sufficient amounts of SAMe. So methionine turns into SAMe, and SAMe can break down histamines, excess dopamine, excess arousal, excess stimulation. SAMe is also necessary for breaking down cortisol and adrenaline. And last but not least, it's one for the ladies and some of the guys, SAMe also helps to break down estrogens. If you're taking any long-term drugs or birth control, etc., you have to be able to methylate properly. And that methylation, according to roundabout number 2, you have to have enough protein and enough magnesium that came from plants and enough from potassium that came from nice healthy fruits. And of course, it generates more SAMe. SAMe is then going to turn into homocysteine. Now, homocysteine is a really bad protein. It's a necessary evil, but it can build up to toxic levels. Ideally, in integrated medicine, you want it between 5 and 7.2. The perfect number is 6.1. But some people are born with genes that don't actually make enough SAMe, and they also have problems with their B12. And the tendency is that they have an increasing level of homocysteine. So the average GP range will run from 0 to around 15, something like that. For us in integrated medicine, it runs between 5 and 7.2. Now, anything higher than a 10 basically is a route to heart disease, cardiovascular disease, and it's also a route for Alzheimer's disease as well. So we now have the power with which to get into this optimal zone. That's absolutely important. Measure your homocysteine if you've got a history or family history of heart disease, etc., and see how close it is to 5 to 7.2. And pretty much homocysteine will then funnel through either down into the transsulfuration pathway to the liver, which is roundabout number 3, or it will get referried and remethylated and turned into methionine. That wheel is happening all the time, billions of times every second. Because the homocysteine is so much like lava and will burn people's brains and hearts as they live, there's another backup plan, a plan B, that actually does a shortcut across the circle. And this is dependent on having enough choline. Choline comes from meat, eggs, caviar, etc. Very, very important molecule. Helps with fertility, helps with period pains, it helps with mood, muscles, and memories. As vegetarians, you can also take it in supplemental forms. You know, you don't have to do it through meats, but choline can be taken in supplemental form. It's a bit faulty on that gene code sequence. It's amber and red. You've got a triple arrow pointing down. You know this gene code sequence is running a lot slower. And of course, what's needed is to actually take on board choline to help it. If the body can't make enough of it, then you have to supplement with it. PQQ, best found in kiwis. Betaine, found in spinach and beetroot. That's really good. And of course, zinc is the cofactor to make the shortcut towards methionine. That is the protein wheel. The summary statement is you can only efficiently break down your proteins with enough methylated B12. And to do that, you'll need some small amounts of zinc, small amounts of SAMe, and the best thing is just see what your gene codes are doing and try to help with those cofactors.